brave new world. Every aspect of our lives will be transformed. It is an exciting, if precarious, place to be. I wish you well.
We cannot condemn the next generation to lives of degradation and despair.
We need equality and we need compensation, and I don't want to feel like I have to wait 10, 20, 30 years for that. I want it right now.
In times of crisis, people want to and need to come together.
We are about to enter into the most consequential revolution in the history of the human race.
History will decide whether we did what we needed to do to help create a better world.
It's a new technological age.
We don't sell data, we don't have an advertisement.
If you're one of the guys who thinks, I just can't hire women, look in the mirror, you're part of the problem.
The tech ecosystem is just a reflection of our ecosystem. We have to find a way to cancel out the stupidity and the rigidity.
Let's not just put our heads in the sand. Let's try to be part of the solution here.
The era of information technology being dominated by only a single geography is rapidly coming to an end.
Silicon Valley actually is slightly shrinking. You see places like Toronto growing faster than Silicon Valley.
Toronto is an incredible city. It is a place where people are going to love to come together.
Collision, bienvenue au Canada.
Thanks so much to Bob for that. Now, let me ask you a question ahead of our next session, and we'll use each other as a bit of a focus group for it. Please raise your hand if you sometimes feel you're a little bit more dependent on technology than you'd like to be. Okay, mixed results there, I'd say about a 50-50 split. But I think we can all agree that we spend a lot of our days stuck staring at our screens. In fact, I'm looking at two of them right now. And while we may not acknowledge it, many of us are addicted to our devices. But is that a problem, or is it just progress? And if it's the former, how do we fix that? Well, to discuss this, please welcome to the stage, in conversation with Louise Lucas of the Financial Times, we have Chen of HTC, Meeta Singh of the Henry Ford Sleep Laboratory, and Recode's own Swisher.
Okay, so who, hands up, is on their phone as we sit here?
Everybody.
Quite a lot, and presume quite a few are and aren't saying it. So, tech addiction, is it a problem? Cara, what do you reckon? Been writing about tech for a long time.
Well, is that a question? It is a
question.
Problem. It is, of course it is. It's a ridiculous problem. As I was coming in here, what I tend to do now is I go up behind people who are just sitting there staring on their phones or walking, especially in the streets, and I scream. I go, hey! Put it down, and it jars people. But I've noticed here, I do that and nobody moves. Like they keep So, yeah, it's a problem.
Meeta, sleep doctor, how is it actually harming health of children and adults?
Well, I mean, if you think about the time you are on tech, what does it take you away from, right? So for me, as a sleep doctor, the first thing that it really does take away from is sleep. You know, sleep is a biological need. You need to sleep about 8 hours every night, and you get on your phone, and, you know, it just keeps going on. The second thing, of course, is while you are at work, it does make you less productive. And then when you're at home, it's taking away time from your loved ones. So that would be, you know, the three main reasons.
Okay, Phil, at HTC, what do you think, and what can tech industry do? First of all, do you see it's a problem, and what can the tech industry do about it?
Absolutely, I see it as a problem. I'm sitting here right now, and I'm tempted to reach in my pocket and take out my phone and check my messages. I mean, it's a constant, it is a problem. It absolutely is an addiction. And so, yeah, this question is a very philosophical question, right? I mean, this is how tech is, but what ought we do? It's this is odd sort of distinction. I mean, is it? I mean, who's to say is what we ought be doing with our phones and interacting? And so, because all the big data and AI will tell you this is how it is, and the engagement, and this is how you make money, and this is how you get attention. But it comes down to what ought we do with this technology addiction. I don't think it's a tech question.
So where does the pressure come from? I mean, we've seen some activist investors in the US have a go at Apple. We've seen France, some other governments start to do it, particularly in schools. Whose responsibility is it? I mean, is this a big tobacco moment, or who should be doing it?
Well, it's, you know, look, all their businesses, all these social media businesses especially, are predicated on what I've called the slot machine of attention. Mm-hmm. And so it creates, I'm sure you can explain the medical parts of it, but these businesses are predicated on this. And what tech tends to do is say, hey, people do what they want. People want to use these things. They tend to do what they want. But the fact of the matter is, I would agree with that if they didn't have 100 people figuring out how to get you to push that red button. They have psychologists, they've got anthropologists, they've got all kinds of people so that just the way the casino industry creates an environment that just the way humans are attracted to sugar and salt and things like that, it's the same kind of idea. And I think the fact that their businesses are predicated on this and absolutely predicated to your attention and engagement means nothing is going to happen from the tech people, and they'll constantly blame it on other things, unless there's some sort of legislative effort, which I can't imagine our politicians will do anything about it, given the lobbying money that they get and things like that. And it's not quite like cigarettes, because it's not that people die of lung cancer and stuff like that. It's a much more insidious and slow-moving issue around changing our minds and creating a much more just a worse society than had been previously.
So I will say, just to, it is similar to cigarettes in one way because it is very portable, right? Mm-hmm. You can take your phone wherever you are. Like you couldn't carry your Xbox everywhere, but like your cigarette, you could carry your cell phone anywhere. But in answer to your question, are these tech companies making these products so good that you can't stop using them? Or are they making them, are they putting things or tweaking them so that you have difficulty stopping them, right? Yes. And I think the answer is the second.
Yes.
Right, and so, giving a little bit of scientific background to what you were saying is that they build in feedback using behavioral science. And the science is that, if your feedback is unpredictable, and it's irregular, then you're more likely to use it. And that's, that's built into the whatever tech you're using, right? And so it makes it, so it's built to make you addicted to it.
Right, so that's built in, Phil. There are still things that tech can, and we have seen some examples, albeit very small. Yep. Tencent, for example, with Honor of Kings, when the government got a bit antsy about that, they managed to limit the hours that children played. Is that something that's feasible? Could tech take that on the chin? That, you know, clicks off if you're under 16 and you've been playing for X hours?
I don't think so. I think that at the end of the day, the game is the bottom line, and the bottom line drives, you know, attention, right? And if that doesn't change, then everything that Carol was saying, from the psychologists to the usability studies to, you know, to the designers, everything is geared towards your attention, right? And the Chinese government stepping in, I think that could make a big difference, right? But they can become this, you know, meta parent of these tech companies and say, no, we need to put a limit on this or that, right? I think tech companies that put a limit to themselves, who's to say? I mean, it could be just a marketing stunt. I mean, I'd be the first to say I'm very skeptical on how genuine, authentic those type of measures put in. But yeah, but you know, this game is played this way, right? So, do you hate the player or do you hate the game? I mean, it's a difficult position to be in.
Well, they've tried to do that. I mean, Apple and Google all of a sudden made announcements about this after quite a bit of criticism on these apps. Just imagine, think of it, the way they put the screen, it's really fascinating. Do you look at your Uber a lot? No, it's a utility, right? You don't sit there and spend time with Uber. It's a utility. What they could easily do is put stupid things, like put everything in a file that's addictive or of that nature, and just put utilities on the front. For example, you're not going to open the Uber and look at it and open it and close it and stuff like that. That's just one app. You don't really use Google that way either. You don't like spend time with Google. You're in and you look for something. I'm looking for a restaurant. I'm at. You don't use Yelp that way or what any of these apps. These are utility apps. They could actually put them in the front and then put everything else in the back. They could do automatic grayscale if you've ever done that. If you click, just so you know, if you click this 3 times, it turns gray. You can see the grayscale. It's really not attractive when you look at a grayscale phone. It really does stop you from looking at it. This is not an attractive phone, right? This doesn't look like anything you want to look at. The minute they remove the colors from it, if they did that at the beginning, it would be really interesting. But they don't tell you that you just tap 3 times on the side and it turns this way. So there's a ton of things they could do initially with the design of the way this is done, so it doesn't look like a candy store where you're always just looking for something to touch, essentially.
So if tech won't either talk a lot about these things, or as you say, it's difficult, who's the next person to take up the role? I mean, not every government can do as Beijing does. How about schools? Where do we start it? I mean, should schools, you hand them in at the door and get them back at the end, like France is trying to do? Or basically, who should be taking up the cudgels here, or who can?
Well, schools is a good place to start. I mean, you know, in fact, there's the Waldorf School, which is in Silicon Valley, which, ironically, 70% of all Silicon Valley tech people send their kids to, and it's tech-free. It's tech-free till 8th grade, right? So, but schools can only do so much because kids do spend time at home. So it's, you know, when it comes to addicting behaviors, I think it's, as a society as a whole, we have a role. You know, we have to. So what you're describing is the fact that there's something in this. In the tech that's making it very attractive. It's making it addicting. But the ultimate reason why you're addicted to it is because of whatever your underlying reason is, which is you're using the tech to mask something, and that needs to be addressed. Right? In fact, the funny thing is that teenagers are using less drugs now because they're more addicted to tech.
Right.
So that's just...
Well, that's good.
Right. It's just something. Because what happens is that the tech, what it does to your brain is very similar to what heroin does. So when you look at somebody who's playing a video game and you take a PET scan of their brain, you find that dopamine is increased. You know, which is, you know, when you think about that dopamine is increased when you're using heroin is alarming, but dopamine is also increased if you eat a bowl of ice cream, to a lesser extent. But that's what it does eventually. You know, there's the reward centers get like...
There was public pressure brought to bear on soda makers. There's been public, with corn syrup.
Right.
There's been public pressure, obviously brought to bear with cigarette makers. There's been all kinds of public pressure things. And what happens with tech, because it's not quite, again, because it's not quite so obvious, the health, that you don't become obese or die of lung cancer and create a real drain on the health system. Which is so visible. Is kind of the things that are happening with this creates a very different kind of brain. It creates a twitchy society. It creates a society that that doesn't pay attention or is unable. That's in a state of a Microsoft researcher called it continuous partial attention, where you can't look at anything. And so it's up to you, the user, to have to put it down and put it somewhere else, which is difficult, as you know. When it's not there, leaving this at home is almost impossible to do. Like, I'm not addicted to anything. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't take drugs. I really can't be without this, and so I understand the addiction part of it. And so when you have characteristics like that, you have to wonder who's going to, obviously you start with parents and things like that, but it's almost overwhelming fight to fight it, because it really is such an attractive thing and it's designed to do that, and it's designed to make you want to involve yourself with it.
And is that going to increase, though? Is it going to get more? I mean, we've been talking about VR and all the other cool things that you're going to be able to do. Rather than stopping this, are we going to see that people are going to become more obsessed? And instead of, I think, Meeta, you're saying 4 to 6 hours now on average we spend, it's going to be 6 to 8. I mean, what's coming up next, Phil, that's going to keep us even more attached? I mean, is it going to be more things, more uses?
Definitely. I mean, in my fund called President's Capital, which is a VR AR fund, I mean, we were very sort of cautious about not investing in just games and consumer products. And one of our big portfolios, we invested in more than 42 companies, and we have maybe 5 to 7 companies invested in sort of mental wellness, mental health spaces, where you put on a VR headset, it helps you cope with your anxiety, with depression, and even pain, right? Now, that's a very, very different use case, and but the way it's used for engagement and psychology, it's the same game at the end of the day. But the purpose of it is, of course, fundamentally different, right? And I'm really interested in what Kara was saying in terms of, there have been campaigns that, cigarette is harmful to us. And in our generation, there's people say that sugar is sort of the cigarette of our generation. And I think, I don't know if from a marketing standpoint, we can say that smartphones is the sugar of, the millennial generation. I think that would be a powerful campaign. And if people are educated to see that it is as harmful as you were saying, even what the dopamine that it triggers in your brain, it's as harmful as cigarettes, it's as harmful as drugs, it's as harmful as sugar, right? I think it has a potential.
I think also to differentiate that maybe we shouldn't say tech is addicting. Maybe we should say the content, some content is addicting, right? And the way that we use it, because of what you just said, you've actually used some of the content to actually help people and actually help cure some disorders. So maybe that is a discussion that needs to be had. So the other thing, in follow-up of one of the things you were saying, so when I think about the effect of tech or addiction on the brain, or on human beings, I would divide that into 4 parts. Number 1 is, psychological. So, we have the complete inability to tolerate boredom, right? Mm-hmm. You're standing in an elevator, you immediately whip out a phone, you have to check what's going on. And if you think about it, most creativity is born out of boredom. Then it has physical effects, especially for kids. We were just talking about how, maybe our kids don't play as much outdoors because they're on the phone. Then there is, I've lost my train of thought, but there's, of course, there's physical, there's financial, because you end up spending money, and then there's social, because the way we communicate with each other, we look at each other's expressions, and then we decide what we're going to say. And if you're on the phone, you want your kids to learn how to
Converse,
communicate.
Yeah.
And be able to be socially adept human beings.
Right.
And you need to do that.
What's interesting around VR, I urge you to listen to a podcast that I just put up. I often bring on, I have two sons, one is 13, and he's backstage actually, and the other is 16. And I sent him to Outward Bound, and I took his phone, and it was a great moment in my life. And this is an outdoor thing where they have to like forage for food. What was really interesting is we did a thing where we went to these new VR entertainment things. I don't know if this one's called, I'm blanking on the name of it. But essentially it's a room and you're outfitted with VR. Yeah, it was great. And we played a pirate game and we all four did it. I have to say it was fantastic. It was really fun because we did interact. We were in a VR environment. And I can't say it was addictive more than it was fun. So it was VR, I'm kind of fascinated with thinking about whether it's actually going to be addictive. If it's done in the right way, it was we had a group, we had to kill pirates, but you could imagine all kinds of things, problem solving you could do, which is somewhat interesting. And then yesterday, Alex and I went to Ocean Park, and there's a VR roller coaster. So you get on an actual roller coaster, which you look ridiculous, I'm sure I did. But I have to say, it was fantastic.
Did you get sick?
No, it was wonderful. It was like taking you under the ocean, and but you were. They could do it without actually having an actual. They do it at Universal Studios, and I thought it was really interesting than a regular roller coaster experience. It was actually quite beautiful, and you had a task, and so you could imagine like really great things in a VR environment as you do them. I think the problems are the helmets are problematic, the tethering. And then the last example I would give, which I feel better about VR in a lot of ways, was there's an astonishing thing that Lorraine Jobs Powell has funded a bunch of others called Carne Arena. And it's an experience of immigrants going across the border to the US and attacked, I'm going to use the words attacked by ICE, coming across the border, and you're wearing it, and they put you in a room, and there's air blowing, and you're not wearing shoes, and you're on a sandy, so you feel there's a lot of, they do a lot of the haptic stuff, essentially, and you actually do feel like you're in that environment, and you're watching them get caught, and you're sort of caught up in it. It was such a moving experience to understand it better than the thing. I think the problem with a lot of those experiences is you can't make someone feel what it feels like the fear of those immigrants coming across the border. They have another experiment at Stanford around empathy, where you go into the body of an African-American young man, and over periods of your life, you get the way many African-American men are treated in the United States, but you can't tell them what it's like to be that person. How do you inject fear into them? How do you inject a lifelong feeling of being under siege? How do you do that? And that will be interesting. If they can put some chip in you where you suddenly understand, it could go a long way towards empathy. I would imagine it could if they did it.
Yes, that's more Black Mirror, right?
Yes, but it could be used for good or evil. Like you could think of awful examples, just the opposite thing. But some of the stuff I've seen has been, I find, very engaging and not addictive, but thoughtful.
Yeah, just to piggy off that, I think VR, it is fundamentally different than putting a phone in your face, which is because VR is fundamentally a first-person point of view kind of experience. And all the things you said about empathy, are things that are much more difficult to achieve in this sort of screen, sort of face relationship, right? It's a kind of a third-person point of view kind of an experience. In VR, it's fundamentally first person. It's about presence and immersion. And so in the experiences that you talk about, whereas the Void or Nomadic or these sort of VR arcades, it also engages your body, right? It is a full body experience, right? And that is the magic of VR. When you can sort of bring sort of the imaginative world in what you see, but when you can engage your hands and feet, I think that's fundamentally different than, of course, picking up your smartphone and basically you're just engaging your eyes and your brain.
This was also wireless, which was interesting. I was still carrying a computer on my back. That's really what it was. But eventually it will be much smaller. It will be a light headset, and it could be, I don't know, what do you think because we were engaging with each other.
But the illusion is your whole body is immersed in that space, right? On a phone, you're not sensing that your whole body is in WeChat or WhatsApp, right? It's a simple It's not a presence for immersion experience, which is fundamentally different.
So in continuation of your point, you found it exciting and you didn't think it was addicting. And I think that may speak more to your personality. So, which is why, it's not just the content that's making it, there is addicting stuff present in the content, but then there is some human element that is playing a role, and that's, combined causes the addiction. I think that's a very good point to make right there.
But it could be a way for people to experience things. Like there's, I'm blanking on her name. She was How to Get Away with Murder. She's an amazing actress, African-American woman. Oh man, she wins Oscars all the time. She was in The Help. She and her husband are doing this Othello in VR, because to get people immersed in the show, and it's fascinating to think about it, because you take a kid to see Othello, it's going to be hard to get them to pay attention to it. But if you're in an immersive something like that, you can imagine it using that attention engagement thing for a good thing versus. Which is why I think Facebook is in Oculus and everything else like that.
I guess a lot with the VR, it gets the empathy, as you say, gives you access to things, also things you can't afford. If you can't afford to go to Kenya, but you can do safari and look right up at the lion. But if all that is got the good stuff, I'm just wondering, Meeta, going back to what you were saying, what kind of generation are we breeding for the ones that aren't doing this empathetic understanding, the immigrant experience or whatever else, but the ones that are just Snapchatting, look, here's me in a bikini, here's me in this.
Right.
Is it narcissistic? Is it boring? What generation are we breeding?
I think that's a difficult question to answer, because these guys, these children who are growing up are still teenagers. I think that, the kids who are completely immersed in this and using, computers all the time. I know that
they don't use computers. They use phones.
Phones, right.
They absolutely don't use computers.
Right. If you're asking me if I see these young kids in clinic a lot, I do, because one of the things that we haven't talked about is the fact that every phone you have has a backlit LED screen, right? That backlit LED screen, does a number on your circadian clock, because it actively suppresses melatonin, which is the hormone that tells you that you're ready to sleep. Now remember, your circadian clock is just like a master conductor. You, in fact, have, biological clocks in every cell in your body, and every function has a circadian rhythm. And so if you mess your master clock, then you're basically messing everything up.
And it also brings loneliness in. I'm doing an experiment using all the various Instagram stories and Snapchat. I'm starting this column for the New York Times. I'm very interested in this topic. So I've been doing Instagram a lot. I don't do it a lot. And I do Twitter a lot more and stuff like that. But what's really interesting is the overwhelming feeling of loneliness it does bring. I'm not a particularly lonely person, but seeing everybody like, oh, we're here doing this, and we're eating this, and we're doing that, it creates a FOMA that's really... Trust me, I'm not someone who cares about anybody else that way, but I'm suddenly like, oh, they're having fun, and I'm not there, and I'm not invited. And it creates this really interesting thing. And so recently, as my next experiment, I'm just posting really awful things, like trash. Like, look at this pile of trash. Hi. I'm feeling gross today. Look at my ugly haircut. Right. Like, I want to see what happens when I'm not being performative, because it's performative. And I have a friend, someone I was dating, who was always obsessed with people with weddings, when they put their hands up in the air, I don't know why straight people do this, but they do. They always get married and then put their hands up in the air like it's a victory, like we did it, like whatever. It's really interesting. Just go look on Facebook. I make it an art form for myself. I keep them. But they do that, and this person was like, oh, I would like to have that. I'm like, why? Like, it was really interesting, because this is a confident person, but is bothered that they don't have their arm in the air, kind of thing. It was fascinating. It was like, so I think the loneliness aspect.
Well, relationships, like I said, are built with conversation, right? Because we were backstage, and because we didn't have phones, we talked about each other's kids. Mm-hmm. And now we have something
We're probably on their phones at the time. So we've got literally 5 seconds each. Is big tech going to have a big tobacco/sugar moment? Cara?
It should.
Yes,
Meeta?
It definitely should.
Phil?
Absolutely.
Unanimous. You have it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.